This video contains spoilers for the quest Imperatrix Umbrosa Act 2, Divina Vulpes Act 1, as well as content from Enkanomiya. If you have not completed these quests, put this video on your watch later list until you have. Otherwise, proceed at your own risk. This will be your only warning. Now then, the Electro Archon's second story quest finally gave her the character development she desperately needed. It did a phenomenal job of delivering her backstory, struggles, and personality in a very compelling way, and I honestly wish Genshin had released it a lot sooner, or just skipped her first quest entirely. But in between those personal moments and reminiscing, there's quite a bit of additional information to sift through, including some bizarro stuff like a fist fighting her personal demons, Leyline sap containing at least 1% ghosts, and Archon brains having literal extra dimensions inside of them, and a time-traveling tree. We have a lot to cover, so without further ado, let's begin the Raiden Shogun story quest recap and analysis. But before that, a quick disclaimer. While this video will contain a brief recap of the quest Imperatrix Umbrosa Act 2, it will also contain a lot of speculation. I will try to contain as much of the speculation as I can to their appropriate sections, but the theorist in me often leaks out, so just be aware of that. If there are any parts that need correcting or supplementary information, they will be added to the pinned comment below, so please make sure to check that out before commenting. And that's it, that's all I've got. So disclaimer done. Let's kick off this video with a recap of the quest itself. I'm going to cover this quest rather quickly, skipping over some of the more interesting lore notes, but don't worry, we will cover those later. Little Yenfei here will pop up to let you know that whatever is being currently discussed is something you should remember for later, so keep an eye out for her. Now then, where were we? Oh, right. This quest begins with the Adventurers Guild commissioning us to investigate the Rifthound attacks on the roots of the sacred Sakura. This is bad because the sacred Sakura is an important leyline tree that helps cleanse and purify the filth from Inazuma. The filth thing is a little complicated of a topic, so just think of it as like a generic corrupted energy accumulation for now. Like a big magical cyst that needs popping or draining or never mind. Anyway, if the tree gets hurt, Inazuma will be in trouble, so off we go to investigate, running into Raiden Ei along the way. As a side note, from here on I will be referring to each of the Raidens by their respective names. Raiden Ei, Raiden Makoto, and Raiden Shogun, the puppet. This is to alleviate some confusion since there are 3 of them and they're all kind of triplets, sort of. Anyway, Ei joins our investigation, and together we track down some Rifthounds who have busted up one of the sacred Sakura's roots. You'll notice that the tree root is almost completely hollow, which is weird because normal tree roots are solid. Really. Beneath the cracked open root is a bunch of blue goo, which is like leyline goo, I guess, or sap of resin? Well, for some reason, from this leyline root goo comes a bunch of fog which brings forth some ghosts from 500 years ago. That means there are ghosts in the Leylines. Remember to thank them the next time you're farming Mora in EXP books. With each ghostly encounter, Ei reveals a little bit more about her history and the events of 500 years ago, including the involvement of Conria. She also takes this opportunity to declare that after her encounter with us on the plane of Euthymia, she has now decided to move forward and reconsider what eternity means to her. We also get a little more clarity on the political roles played by Ei and Makoto, respectively. Makoto was the brains, while Ei was the brawn, which makes it all the stranger why Makoto would go to Conria and put herself in danger when she lacked the strength to properly protect herself. Seems like a bad idea. However, by the time all the Rifthounds had been cleared out, Ei starts losing control of her body. Well, the puppet body, anyway. The Shogun decides that Ei is a threat to her programmed ideal of eternity and effectively restricts Ei's ability to move the puppet body. We take Ei to a cave beneath the sacred Sakura where she opens a hidden torii gate, which leads into her deceased sister's consciousness. But inside of Makoto's head space, there is no Makoto. Only Ei and the Shogun. They challenge each other to a duel, and then Ei pushes us back through the portal so that we can give Yae a message. So, off we go to Yae, who is extremely broken up over Ei being in deep, deep trouble. So she helps send us back through the portal to find her. So then we're back in Makoto's brain domain, where it turns out another 500 years have somehow magically passed because time is kermuckled in here. Ei finally wins the duel against the Shogun after 500 years, and when she does, Makoto finally emerges from Ei's sword as a ball of light. Which is funny because her demon name is Ball, right? Okay. Makoto and Ei have a very touching reunion during which Makoto gives Ei a purple crystalline seed. Ei, I guess, plants the seed inside of Makoto's brain domain, and instantly a Sakura tree sprouts, both in the brain domain and on Narukami Island, because time is an illusion and apparently Ei can plant seeds in the future and grow trees in the past, because that's apparently the thing. Makoto says goodbye for real this time, and Ei and Yae reunite at the shrine, and the Sakoku decree is finally abolished after 5 version updates. That's like 30 weeks, right? That's a long time. And that's it. That's really the whole quest in a nutshell. I know I missed a lot, but that's okay. This is just a little quick synopsis summary type thing, right? Now we get to go to the fun part. Now it is time to analyze. Time for an abrupt shift. In the book Before Sun and Moon, which is a book that we get from a quest in Enkanomiya, there is a passage titled The Parable of the Tree. Before a story quest came out, this passage was, cryptic at best, but now I think I kind of get its implications. Ignoring most of the fluff in this passage, basically there's this dude that doesn't want to cut down a tree because it takes 500 years for it to grow. So an incarnation of the god of time, Istaroth, tells him that if he wills it, his thought will echo throughout time and the tree will then grow in an instant. So he does what he tells him to, plants the tree, and bam! Tree grows instantly. No 500 years required. The passage then goes on to say that Istaroth takes the seeds of the present and carries them into the past, which is kind of a weird line that gets echoed a lot in many different forms throughout the entire game, but it's also kind of sort of maybe a little bit probably okay, maybe it's exactly what happened with Ei and the sacred Sakura tree. She planted a seed in the future and it grew way far away in the past. Interestingly, the idea of the present or the future altering the past is referenced in another fictional book called Vera's Melancholy. I will not summarize this book because it's super long and a little confusing, but essentially it's about a girl who meets an interdimensional time-traveling wizard named Ike and she goes on adventures with him. I'm paraphrasing. Anyway, in Volume 9, Vera gets infected by a malicious magic virus, and another character begs the wizard to rewind time in order to save her. In other words, he wants her to go into the past and prevent Vera from ever getting the virus in the first place. But the magic wizard dude says, "You don't understand. Only the future can save the past, not the other way around." Which is weird. It's a weird thing to say. Now, Istaroth is heralded as the god of moments, or even the god of time, but she also goes by the name the god of 1,000 winds of time. And in Mondstadt, there just so happens to be a temple dedicated to the 1,000 winds, as well as a secret island to the east of Starsnatch Cliff called Time and Wind Island, or at least that's what we call it because that's the name of the quest that you get when you go there. It's kind of a nameless island, but anyway, the names are coincidental enough, but both locations also have a sundial, which is an instrument used to measure time, upon which is engraved the words, "Stories brought on the wind will bloom into legends in due time." Are you starting to see a pattern here? Basically, this god of time from Enkanomiya, who is associated with wind, carries seeds and stories that bloom in time. Past, present, future, doesn't matter, anytime. And we know that Ei's quest is referencing the god of time, Istaroth, specifically because she says it outright. She suggests that Makoto must have had help from a higher power, and she specifically implies Istaroth. Well, I mean, it's written right there. Now, if you've watched my video on Teyvat's prehistory, you'll remember that I strongly implied that Venti is connected to the god of time. I'll leave a link to that video downstairs if you haven't watched it and want to learn more about the connections between the two, since I only really want to focus on a couple of points for now and I just can't cover everything. See, before Venti became the Anemo Archon, he was just a tiny wind spirit. Istaroth was known as the Thousand Winds, remember? So it's very possible that Venti was originally a wind spirit that served Istaroth directly. Further evidence to connect the two comes from Venti's voice lines.
That was a refreshing sleep. Traveler, we meet again. What? You don't remember me? Well, allow me to join you on your quest once again. I must see to it that the bards of the world tell the traveler's tales.
I'm pretty sure Venti is the only character in the entire game who suggests that we've met before in their voice lines, so I don't think he's talking about the incident with Dvalin here. He could be, but I don't think so. Instead, it's possible that he has met us before, perhaps even in another timeline, but we'll get to that later. There's also this shot from his teaser trailer which mentions being born from the branches of time, branches implying that the trees are involved here and trees make seeds which get carried by the winds of time. And of course there's this line of his from the Archon quest for A Tomorrow Without Tears.
There's not a single song I do not know, no matter if it's from the past, present, or future.
Which implies that, if he's telling the truth, his abilities somehow transcend time itself. Weirdly, Ei also seems to be able to transcend time to a degree. For example, while it only took like an hour for the traveler to fetch Yae from the shrine, over 500 years had passed for Ei within Makoto's brain domain. And when Yae sends us through the Torii Gate to fetch Ei, we see a lot of fractured, moments rushing by. And if you stop at just the right moment, you'll see a bunch of Cecilias, for no apparent reason. And Cecilias are Venti's favorite flower, and he decorates his clothing and accessories with them. They're kind of like his symbol. This flower is also the symbol on the door to literally every domain. And what's inside those domains? Leyline trees, petrified ones, or maybe it would be more accurate to say that these trees are frozen in time. But listen, I know you're thinking about all these possibilities for timeline alterations, time travel, paradoxes, time loops, and all that bull shakalaka. But the more important takeaway here is that time and ley lines are inextricably linked, almost like they're the same thing, or they're subject to the same rules. But to understand how this can be the case, we need to take a closer look at ley lines. Ley lines themselves lead a rather vague existence in the main plot, but once you start looking for references to them, you'll begin to see them everywhere. They are ubiquitous, and if something in the world has gone amiss, you can basically blame them on the ley lines and you'll have a good shot at being right, like a really good shot. Just blame everything on the ley lines, it's probably right. If you don't know, ley lines are basically like veins of energy that permeate every facet of the human realm. You can think of them like the cardiovascular system of the human realm world type thing, with ley line trees like the sacred Sakura functioning like hearts or pumps to keep energy flowing throughout the system. It's like a planetary regulatory system that appears to control every facet of life, including weather, fate, birth, death, and even time itself, but we'll touch on this later. Now, in the 2.53 Realm Gateway Offerings event, Asumi tells us that ley lines themselves seem to permeate only the human realm. The book Before Sun and Moon states that before the Primordial One remade the world, it had to battle the Viships, which already existed there. But Viships aren't a part of the human realm, they're part of the light realm, aka the elemental realm. It's therefore quite possible that when remaking the world for the humankind, and thus creating the human realm, the Primordial One and its shades used the elemental energy from the light realm to power the ley lines. I say this because we know for a fact that elemental energy flows within the ley lines. But elemental energy is only part of what we know exists within the ley lines. The other known part is just called memories. Conceptually, we can think of memories in the same way we think of data stored in a computer. Individual memories are like files, so when a person dies, they are returned to the Leylines in a process that's not unlike deleting a file on your computer. Once deleted, the file actually continues to exist on your hard drive and can be recovered even after it's removed from the recycle bin. This is because data is persistent until it is overwritten by new data. The same rules kind of apply to Leylines. It's a good metaphor for it. When someone dies in Tevat, all of their information is essentially converted into memory data that then circulates within the Leylines as raw material. This is how we're able to see the ghosts from 500 years ago in a story quest. Their memories were still in the local Leyline network. Interestingly, in Yae's story quest, Yae outright states that a ghostly spirit is just another way to refer to a memory. In other words, a ghost or a spirit is just the memory of that person. This serves as additional confirmation that this is consistently the way things are, and not just a localized event due to the Rift Hounds attacking the sacred Sakura roots. But the Leylines' memories are not limited to just people. They're instead the accumulated memories of everything that's ever existed. Think of them as like tiny snapshots of everything going on in the world at any given time, all packed into one circulatory system. In some ways, we can think of this flow of memories as the memory of the world itself. But just as human memories are fickle, so too are the world's memories. Messing with the Leyline root system messes with the flow of memories, which can result in something small like the manifestation of ghostly figures, or something big, like the large-scale weather event that occurred when the Skyfrost Nail destroyed a local Leyline tree and Dragonspine and caused the entire mountain to be encased in never-ending ice and snow. Large-scale tampering with the Leyline trees can also appear to alter time itself, as illustrated by Tsurumi Island, when the Leylines caused a certain day to repeat itself over and over and over and over and over and over and over again for like 1,000 years or more, until we fix them. These glitchy memory events are known as Leyline disorders, and yes, those are the same disorders we experience in the Spiral Abyss and within domains. Interestingly, some Leyline disorders within domains, like slowing waters, seem to have effects linked to time. To use slowing waters as an example, it increases the amount of time needed for a burst or skill to come off of cooldown. You could say that it's slowing down time. Now, along Leyline disorders, most domains possess petrified Leyline trees, which we then feed resin to and are able to extract memories that crystallize into artifacts and materials. What's cool about this is that real resin completely preserves whatever gets trapped inside it. And inside of fragile and condensed resins are a leaf and a tree, meaning we're probably helping the tree remember what it was like to be non-petrified, like when it had leaves and stuff again. And this is probably what gives it enough energy to give us some stuff, materials and artifacts and stuff. In a lot of ways, we're helping the tree remember things. We're collecting snapshots of its memories, snapshots of time, kind of, from a tree, which would make the Irminsul and the Leyline trees kind of like trees of times. Yeah? Okay, I'm gonna go out on a limb here for a second. Trees produce seeds, obviously. Some seeds get carried by the wind. Leylines contain memories that get regulated by Irminsul trees. Therefore, an Irminsul seed must in some way contain a memory, and a memory viewed by an outsider is nothing more than a short story, and a story is nothing more than a series of moments in time. Which brings us back full circle to the seed that Makoto gave to Ei, and the text on the wind and time sundials: stories brought on the wind will bloom into legends in due time. And then also the line from Vera's Melancholy: only the future can save the past and not the other way around. And then we have the seed that Makoto gave to Ei, which is somehow a perfect execution of that line from Vera's Melancholy, since Ei planted a seed in the future that technically saved the past, kinda sorta. But for all this talk of seeds, we haven't talked about fruits from which seeds are made, right? In several other of my videos, but most notably this one here, we established that fate is dictated by constellations in a fake sky made up of fake stars that are actually the crystalline fruit of a tree in the sky, which I have suggested to be the world tree. There isn't a single scenario where I think the world tree isn't connected to the Leylines, so that means that the world tree not only contains elemental energy and memories and governs over time itself, but it also has some ability to determine one's fate via constellations, which is weird. Why? Because determining one's fate absolutely implies that time is predetermined, which means that the future isn't unfolding and being created dynamically. Predetermination is at odds with the idea of reweaving fate or the future, or taking control of one's future, which appears to be the whole point of this game, according to Dainsley from the Travail trailer, when he talks about this supposed loom of fate we're gonna reweave eventually once we beat his butt. So consider this. If memories are like snapshots, then time is just accumulated memories set in a progressive order, in which case a seed could simply be a memory. If you plant the seed, you're basically putting another point on a linear timeline, thereby altering the order of events. That kind of implies that time is nothing more than another memory of how to order all of the other memories. And while time itself as a concept has always seemed pretty stable and very difficult to alter, because time travel is supposed to be a really difficult thing to do, memories are actually very fickle. You can create new childhood memories. You can remember people saying things that they never actually said. You can be convinced that you remembered an event that never actually happened. You can forget things. And this is all because the brain has all these Polaroid-like moments stored together in one big disorganized box. One doesn't necessarily connect to another in the same cause and effect manner that we see illustrated by the concept of time. Instead, basically everything is connected to everything else, and it takes extra points of reference to place these memories in their proper order. We call this reference time. We put points on a timeline. The reason I'm so fixated on this is because MiHoYo has done a lot with the concept of time travel and time manipulation within their multiverse, so they have really specific rules around what extent time can be altered, what requirements are necessary to do so, and what the ramifications are. Now, only a couple of weeks before version 2.5 in Genshin was released, Honkai Impact had this massive story reveal where the game's most prominent villain, Auto Apocalypse, actually managed to do the impossible and altered the timeline, kind of. Otto had to sacrifice so much and work so hard for hundreds of years with what appears to be thousands of failed attempts just to succeed one time. The sheer scope of the effort and energy he exerted is so far beyond a simple planting of a little seed that I just cannot compare the two on equal terms. I find it incredibly difficult to believe that MiHoYo would release two separate instances in two different games of timeline alterations with completely opposite difficulties in their implementation. I can't fathom those being the same thing. And okay, sure, Otto didn't have a god of time helping him out or anything, and maybe that's the cop-out explanation here. But I don't like time travel without ramifications or rules. It's too loosey-goosey. In Honkai's case, Otto's achievement splits the timeline, which allows Honkai Impact to tell an alternate version of the same story without actually destroying the current one. Genshin Impact doesn't have that luxury. Genshin Impact has one timeline. What Otto managed to do in Honkai was to force a split in the timeline so that instead of one linear progression, there are now two, and this works for Honkai's narrative. It does not work for Genshin's narrative. When you compare a forced timeline split to Ei's planting of a seed that made something appear in the past, it just doesn't feel the same. Ei's accomplishment feels a bit more like someone took all of the memories within the timeline, threw another one in, and then shook the whole world like a snow globe, allowing all the memories to resettle and get reordered by time. You know, that one memory that remembers where all the memories go. And that left time with one extra piece that it then places wherever it makes the most sense for it to do so. So time misremembers that moment. So time then places that moment at the very beginning, thus changing the way time remembers the world. It's not another timeline, it's not a branch, it's not a convergence, it's something the world has misremembered, and that memory may not even be permanent. After all, Makoto did say the sea would buy a time, not that it would solve the problem. Time might correct itself. And generally, I would say that this would still constitute some kind of time paradox, since Ei apparently had her memories of a time before the sacred Sakura existed, but that's not really the case, I don't think. Remember how 500 years passed within Makoto's consciousness, but only like an hour passed of Tevat time? Well, Yae Miko says something rather odd when she sends us back into the brain domain.
Everything is turbulent and disordered. If you try to force your way in, you could be swept away by a giant wave that sets you down in an unknown corner of space-time.
Basically, she's saying that wherever Ei is, she's surrounded by chaos somewhere in the depths of space-time, which is to say, she exists in a place where time is not ordered and therefore non-linear, just like how we described memories from earlier. This leads me to believe that the realm of consciousness exists outside the ordered flow of time, and so does Khaenri'ah. Or maybe it's less that they're outside the flow of time, and more so that they're just things that time, forgot. Remember that the sacred Sakura didn't exist in Inazuma until after Ei returned from Khaenri'ah. Then she said it had magically appeared as if it were always there. So Ei went to Khaenri'ah with no sacred Sakura, then she obtained Makoto's consciousness, which contained the sacred Sakura seed, and when she returns to Inazuma, the memory of the world had already been updated to include the existence of the seed and the sacred Sakura. However, Ei's memory remained unchanged because she was in Khaenri'ah at the time and therefore outside of the mass memory update. Now, the neat thing about Khaenri'ah possibly existing outside the realm of time is that it answers a lot of previously unanswerable questions. For example, remember when I had this meltdown over Enkanomiya's messed up timeline? Well, Khaenri'ah and Enkanomiya were both underground nations, and connected, probably, via underground tunnel networks. Therefore, we can assume Enkanomiya existed outside of Tevat's normal flow of time, and if that's the case, the timeline starts to make sense again. That estimated 200-year timeline I laid out that was supposed to take place over the span of around 3,000 years of Tevat time is now a possible thing, like a realistic thing, because the world's memories of Enkanomiya were not placed in the correct spots within the timeline when it reacquainted itself with the surface. And then there's this whole issue with Kaya showing up as a child from Khaenri'ah 500 years after it was destroyed. If Khaenri'ah exists outside the flow of time, then it's possible only a few days passed in Khaenri'ah while a few hundred years passed in Tevat, meaning Kaya could have been brought to the winery straight from the smoldering remains of the cataclysm. And you remember Venti's line from earlier when he asked if we remembered him? Well, Venti also has a realm of consciousness, just like Makoto does, and we got to see it for a few seconds in his story quest. If Venti, as an Archon, can maintain his realm of consciousness outside of the flow of time, then that means he can maintain his own memories regardless of how many times the Leylines update the world, which means that he probably did meet us before, but that our memories were updated with the world while his were not, which might explain this scene when we're leaving the Tenshukaku and our brain is all kind of foggy and fizzly and something's obviously wrong. It's possible our memories were being tampered with. Now, if you're wondering why this applies to Venti specifically and not to Ei, since I suggested that the only reason why she maintained her memory was because she was in Khaenri'ah at the time and not because she has a realm of consciousness, remember that Ei was never actually an official Archon. Makoto was. Makoto was the one with the Gnosis and all that jazz. She was the one that Celestia recognized. The realm of consciousness that Ei was in during the story quest actually belonged to Makoto and not Ei. Ei seems to just have the plane of euthymia, which appears to be different compared to the realm of consciousness. Meaning if another world memory update happens again, she probably won't notice it. But Venti and Zhongli might. And if all of that is even remotely accurate, it starts to make sense why the Archons couldn't leave Conria alone. We've seen that the Leylines themselves are fragile. If something as small as a few Rift Hounds can cause massive damage to them, one small hiccup and time starts to loop on itself, weather goes haywire, ghosts start cropping up all over the place, and so on, etc. Conria's ambitions may have threatened the very fragile, balanced existence that the Leylines brought to the world. Rhine-Daughter is the one who usually takes most of the blame for the cataclysm of 500 years ago. And she was the one who told Albedo to show her the truth of this world. This truth might be related to the true nature of the world, how it came to be and why it is the way it is. The truth might be the reason why Enjo and the Abyss Order are looking for evidence to support their suspicions in hidden regions and forbidden books. And speaking of forbidden books, Before Sun and Moon claims that Teyvat was born from an egg. Now, I've said this before in another video on the topic of Teyvat's creation, but a seed is just the egg of a plant. So Teyvat could have started from seed, from a single memory, a single reference point from which time begins. A seed just like that which was given to Ei by Makoto. A seed that was supposed to buy Ei some time. So maybe the same logic applies to the world tree. Maybe that seed was never supposed to be permanent. Maybe it was only supposed to buy Teyvat some time. And maybe time is running out. I probably left you all with more questions than answers, but I think that's kind of what makes theorizing fun. So, what sort of things did you pick up from Ei's second story quest? Let me know down in the comments, and make sure to check the pinned comment for more juicy tidbits, corrections, and video updates. Thank you all so much for watching. I greatly enjoyed this quest. It's been so much food for thought and just fun in general, and that boss takes so long to beat, and it's so annoying, but it's so much fun too. So it just, it's good stuff all the way around. And yeah, just definitely share your thoughts with me. I want to hear what you guys think about this and Enkanomiya and Yae's story quest and everything else. So 2.5 has been a really good update, at least for me. Well, anyway guys, I'm gonna cut it off here, but again, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.